Okay, I make it a few minutes now after 10:30, so or close to that. So yeah, let's get started. So I'm David Smith from Arrow. Thanks very much for joining us today on this Commvault Webinar Wednesday. It is in fact the last Commvault Webinar Wednesday of the year. This must be, I think, probably our fifth one that we've run now. So if you've been with joined us on the previous webinars, thanks very much for being on those. Thanks for being on this one today as well. This is being recorded, so if you're watching this back on demand, thanks for watching it back on demand too. We will be getting this uploaded to our YouTube channel, hopefully a little bit later on today. Just a little bit of housekeeping, if I could, before I just hand over to Pierre. Thank you. So during today's webinar, as an attendee, you are muted by default, but if you do have any questions as the webinar is going along, there's a Q&A button at the top of your Teams webinar screen there. So if you've got any questions during the webinar, just launch that Q&A, click that Q&A button, post that question into there, and Pierre and Gary will do their very best to answer those questions at the end of the session as well. As I said earlier, this webinar is also being recorded, so you can watch this back on demand. You'll get a link to watch it back later on today too. Please do share that with any of your colleagues should you wish to, if you feel that they'll benefit from learning all about Cloud Rewind too. And as I say, it will be on our YouTube channel, hopefully later on today as well. And then post-webinar, any questions, you can email the Commvault team here at Arrow, and there's the email address on your screen right now. So that's definitely enough from me for now. I'll be back on a little bit later on for the questions, but I'm going to hand it straight over now to Pierre Louw from Commvault. Good morning, Pierre.
Good morning, David. Good morning, everybody, and hope you're all having a good morning. Thanks for inviting me, David, and appreciate the time with you guys. So I am going to speak about one of our new flagship products. Before I do, maybe just a quick introduction. My name is Pierre. I'm a sales engineer at Commvault and have been in information technology for as long as I can remember. I've done many stints with many companies from a sales point of view as well as a technical point of view. And currently find myself at Commvault looking after our solutions with both our partners and our distributors. So I'm sure all of you know Commvault as a company and what we do. The reason for this webinar is obviously to put a focus on Cloud Rewind. It is a company formerly known as Apprenix. The acquisition was made a couple of years ago, and as with any acquisition, that is now being integrated into the Commvault solution. So before we open our eyes next time, there will be a new widget within our Commvault Command Center that gives you the ability to manage everything over and above the data. So let me start off by saying Commvault is not a backup and recovery company anymore. We don't classify as that anymore. We're now a data security and cyber resilient company, which means we are focused on making sure that we are able to allow our clients to get back on their feet as quickly as possible, not just to make sure you've got a safety net should your data be removed for any whatsoever reason. Now, we are not a DR company, but we are closely aligned to a DR solution and how we work on remediating and getting people's environments back up and running again. I'm going to start off with just briefly explaining the current slide on the screen, and that is the shared responsibility model. Everybody is probably aware of this, but just to reiterate, what you see on the screen is pretty much a encapsulation of what is your responsibility as a client or a consumer, what is the responsibility of the cloud provider, and what is shared responsibility between the two. So when we talk around platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and software as a service, there's a fundamental difference between who owns what and who is responsible for what. 9 out of 10 times, you as the client is responsible for all your data, irrespective of where it resides. So the scalability between PaaS and IaaS, or platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. It gives you a bit more autonomy in terms of operating systems, installing software, and so on. But essentially what this is enforcing is that your data is your responsibility, and that will always be the fact of the matter. So we are going to delve into more than just what the data element is all about. So we all know that we're responsible for our data. However, when we look at the following slide, this gives you a good indication in terms of how the world has progressed. The right-hand picture is not an old telephone exchange. It is actually a screen grab of an existing client's infrastructure. And each and every line associated to that picture is a connection between two objects. On the left-hand side is what we normally, or we knew how networks pretty much worked. You've got your applications, you've got your middleware, and you've got your databases. And that is pretty much the monolithic way of how networks ran. You had no problem in terms of worrying about multi-connectivity, distributed environments, microservices, and so on. So we have now moved out of that realm to what you see on the right-hand side. What that means is that everything is always moving. Everything is changing every minute and second of the day. The reason for that, people change, the ideas change, company dynamics change, and everything on the right-hand side will always be affected by that. And I'm now going to explain the right-hand side in more detail. So when we look at the three big cloud providers, specifically AWS, GCP, as well as Azure, we are looking at a environment where you've got the ability to have SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS solutions running in their environment. A normal environment within a cloud solution provider, such as the three that I just mentioned, includes everything from the data that you use, so your production raw data, and then over and above that, everything that they provide you in terms of network environment, network structure, IP addresses, gateways, storage, and many other things. So traditionally, backup and recovery would back up the data that resides in those objects and successfully restore if you need to restore. But what happens if your environment gets disrupted? So in other words, let's not say Google goes down completely or Azure goes down completely, because the chances of that is really, really limited. But let's say your subscription gets hacked or corrupted, or anything that might cause you harm, and you don't have access to your objects that resides in that environment, such as virtual machines, databases, and every other kind of object that you can think of. Now, traditionally, a native backup will give you a 30-day grace period where you can get your data points and maybe some objects back, but there's no granularity in that. The bigger picture is that if your environment goes down, you are reliant on your own environment specialists to actually rebuild your environment. So it's all good and well having backup and recovery for your variable data, but what happens with the underlying dependencies? So the right-hand side is all the underlying dependencies. That is everything from a LAN connection, a network interface card, a storage account, a subnet, and everything that makes up that object and allows that object to work. So Cloud Rewind is now able to allow you to not just get your data back, but also it rebuilds your entire underlying infrastructure. So again, what I said in the beginning, we are now a data resiliency company. So our aim is to see how we can quickly get you back on your feet. So traditionally, you would need to, first of all, provision a new subscription, then create a new blueprint of your entire network. Once that's done, then you can restore all the data that you've got on your backups. With Cloud Rewind, we can rebuild the environment as well as restore your data on top of that. So it is now a uniform one-click process where you are able to restore all the data as well as the underlying infrastructure if everything goes down. So what I'm trying to explain on this slide is, what does an ARM look like? So I'm focusing on Azure just by default because the demo is on Azure, but it is pretty much the same across all three cloud providers. Azure uses a Azure Resource Manager to deploy a resource. And what I'm showing on the right-hand side is what the code looks like. Now, ARMs and GCP and AWS uses the same concept where you've got the ability to edit or automate the installation process of a application or a workload. And this is one example of an ARM. There's 148 lines of code. There's 270 variables that is in this ARM. And this does not even include the network environment. This only includes the workload. So on the right-hand side, you'll see the code. And I'm going to click through page by page so you can see all the variable line by line data that encapsulates an ARM. So that ARM gets used to install an application. But what happens if that application changes by any means, user intervention, change of business priorities, whatever the case might be? That means your ARM changes. That means your network environment changes. And that means that your updated blueprint should reflect the changes. So Cloud Rewind has got three major focus points, what it's doing. It backs up the configuration of all your dependencies, which is agentless. So we don't install any agents anywhere. It is a proper agentless environment where we are able to back up the code. The second thing is that it is a cloud native and geolocation backup and recovery solution that auto scales, which means you've got the ability to have a working environment in one region and you can restore to another region completely isolated from that tarnished region where you want to get rid of. And then the focus of this is, we call it recovery as code. Recovery as code means that we can recover the JSON code out of any working environment and then make that a recovery and therefore rebuild your underlying infrastructure. So I have got a short demo that I want to present to you guys. Before I do, if there is any pressing questions on the couple of slides that I've shown, please unmute yourself, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have before I do a brief demo to show you how the system works. Okay, I take that everybody is happy. I will then move over to the demonstration. So Cloud Rewind, as I mentioned previously, it is formerly called Franix, is an application, a SaaS application that is currently running independently from Commvault Command Center. It is, however, being integrated and will be fundamentally one UI to manage everything. So essentially, the front end of Cloud Rewind allows you to have an overview in terms of your resources, an overview of where are they protected, and also an overview of what is currently being done from a backup and a recovery point of view. So Before I go into this, I want to explain this screen. This is just one portion of a JSON export out of Microsoft Azure. And as you can see, it highlights everything that is dependable, public IP addresses, disks, virtual machines, and so on. And all these fundamentally make up a resource group that allows you to have an application that runs successfully in cloud. Now, that line is somewhere here, and as you can see, there's a huge amount of code that allows us to have this in a visible structure. So if any of these variables changes, then that changes the dynamics of that particular application. We do recovery as code, which means we back up all the code, and we can back up the code in certain time frames, which means you've got a point in time recovery capability. So the easy the easiness of navigation around Cloud Rewind is pretty simple. You onboard cloud connections. Now, cloud connections can be anything from the 3 cloud providers: AWS, GCP, and Microsoft Azure. That is essentially allowing you to onboard one of your subscriptions. You can have multiple subscriptions in one cloud environment, or you can have multiple subscriptions in multiple cloud environments. Once you've onboarded your cloud connections, that is essentially just a single sign-on connection that you do with a global admin to connect that other Microsoft Azure or GCP subscription. Once that is done, the second and last thing you need to do is set up assemblies. Now, assemblies is what we're going to focus on, because you can have multiple assemblies on multiple workloads on multiple regions. We're going to focus on this particular one called OpenEMR. Now, OpenEMR is an application for a doctor, and that allows them to look at all their patient records. So we're going to focus on that one for now. And I want to, before I do, go into my Microsoft Azure. So you will notice that under resource groups, I've got quite a few resources, but the one I'm going to focus on again is OpenEMR. So that application is being protected by Cloud Rewind. There it is, and it is being backed up and it is protected by Cloud Rewind. So I'm going to go into it and show you what it actually does. So when we click on that application, it opens up a web app and it allows me to log into my custom OpenEMR application that gives me the ability to manage my medical records for all my patients. Now, if this goes down, I am out of business because I've lost all my patients, and I'm probably in trouble with the fact that I've lost PII. So this is for me of utmost importance. And what we need to protect within that OpenEMR resource group are all these fundamental and extremely important objects. Everything from SSH keys, so you can get back into a Linux machine, function apps, the disks, the OSs, virtual machine, and everything else that is required. So everything you see on this screen is essentially everything you see on this screen, but underlying all these dependent variables and everything contained within the JSON code. So for me to cover this and protect this, I need the data of all my clients, which is within the storage accounts, but I also am dependent on network configuration, which is all the dependencies. So how do we go about doing this? If I click on OpenEMR, you'll notice that I've set it up in a primary and recovery region, which means I have got a redundancy. This means that if I show you my resources, again, these are the resources for OpenEMR. They are exactly the same as they are in my Microsoft Azure. And this means I can now, from a visual point of view, see what I am protecting, where they are, and have full management over my resources. So then we go and create a policy to say, I want to do a snapshot on a daily basis, hourly, monthly, weekly, and you can set up your own policies in terms of backup, which means you can back up as conveniently and quickly as possible for you to have your data available. So on my timeline, you will notice that I am actively doing an hourly snapshot. So I've got an hourly snapshot, which means my RPO is only 60 minutes. You can do snapshots on a quicker basis, which means your RPO reduces accordingly. So let's say that we are in a disaster recovery situation. This entire subscription has gone down. I am now left with no access to my OpenEMR app, which means we are out of business. Now, the way that I can recover is as follows. Go into Cloud Rewind. I can go to the latest backup set. You can see that we are currently protecting all these objects. And as you can see that I am also have got the ability to recover on another region. So if you remember in the beginning, there was a map and you've got the ability to do cross-region recoveries. So you can see that I've got the same amount of objects in both regions. Now, if I recover and I say open EMR recovery, and I want to do that cross-region, I want to do the entire assembly. You can also specify specific assemblies. So if you had many resource groups that you are included in a subscription, you can select those independently. But for this exercise, we will just say the entire assembly, and I will say recover. It then commands me to say, are you sure you want to recover? Yes, please. And we do a recovery. You can see that Cloud Rewind is now doing a recovery. What it is currently doing is it is rebuilding my entire environment that I had essentially in the beginning, which was, by the way, in central US. It is now rebuilding in completely a different part of the country. This does not take long, dependent on how many workloads and how many dependencies you have within your environment. But when we click back, you'll see that the recovery status is complete, which means my recovery has been completed. So if I go back to my Microsoft Azure tenant and I go into my resource groups, you will notice that if I go down to OpenEMR, the one that I've shown you in the beginning, which was in central US, you'll see that I now have an OpenEMR recovery. That is the one I've just done, and that is in East US. So if I click on OpenEMR, East US, you'll see it has got a new location, it's got a different subscription, but it's got all the dependencies back on track for me to be able to function as a company. I can then set variables like private IPs, public IPs. I can do certain changes in the network to make sure that we've got DNSs correct and so on. But essentially, everything is ready in terms of all the underlying dependencies. So if I go to OpenEMR web app in East US, which is the rebuild, you will see that it's got a new IP address, it's got a new subnet, and I have got the ability to actually click on the IP. And this then takes me to the app, which is now, for me, ready to be used in a new environment, but essentially flawless in the sense of I had no worry or need to have to rebuild all the data that I had in that particular environment. So just go back to that one. So essentially, this resource group, OpenEMR, is a duplicate in another region that has made me successfully recover the entire environment with different dynamics and different variables in terms of IP addresses and so on. So essentially what I've done is I've rebuilt that with this code in a new environment in a matter of minutes, and not hours and even weeks for people to rebuild a blueprint network, which does take a lot of time. And with that, David, I have come to the end of my demonstration of Cloud Rewind, and hopefully that explanation, the presentation in terms of what it entails, does make sense. If it doesn't, happy to take some questions from the audience.
Amazing. Fabulous. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to work out, is my mic unmuted, is my camera back on? Yeah, no, thank you, Pierre, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. We have had some questions that have come in. Please do put any questions that you have got while I'm just going to start reading some of these out into the Q&A option here. But let me just go ahead and let me just ask you the first question. It says here, hi Pierre, great presentation, thank you. How is Cloud Rewind different from traditional backup and recovery solutions? Good question.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good question. So traditional backup solutions only restore your data. Cloud Rewind goes much further, where it rebuilds the entire cloud environment. So there's two fundamental differences. A lot of people out there still think that if I'm in Microsoft and I lose my data, I can back up my data. I can then restore my data in the environment that they provide, which is not true. So when a cyber incident occurs and you need more than just the data, you need your applications, your cloud configurations, all the dependencies are shown you, the infrastructure, that is not available. You need to recreate that manually. So Cloud Rewind uses an automated process of discovering all dependencies. They map them to understand your complete infrastructure as per the JSON picture that I've shown you, and then you're able to then restore from there. There's way more granularity. Native normal backup and recovery has got much limitations in terms of granularity and time that you can keep your data. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Yeah. Even I understood that, and I'm not very technical at all. That's really good. Here's another one, and it says, again, I don't understand the question at all, but I'm hoping that you do. It says, can you explain the cross accounts and cross region replication capabilities?
Yeah, perfect. So Microsoft, Google, and AWS are all massive environments where there's network peering across all of the environments, which means us as vendors and you as consumers have got the ability to pretty much traverse the network anywhere you want. So the world has become really, really small. So what that means is that without any worry, you can spin up a subscription in America somewhere, even though you are situated in the UK. And when a disaster hits, you can use the data that you are using as a backup and you can restore it somewhere else. So when we talk around cross-account and cross-region replication, Cloud Rewind gives you the ability to take your data as well as the underlying infrastructure as code that we're backing up for you and shifting that to another environment. So it's a lift and shift, and you can pretty much open up your business somewhere else. So essentially, it gives you the ability to take whatever you had in one region. If it fails, you can back up and restore your data completely out of that environment. So when we talk around out of place restores, it means that if, say, the UK goes down and all the availability zones go down in the UK, you can still gain access to your company as a whole in terms of network environment, underlying infrastructure, and the variable data, because you can restore it to, say, an availability zone in America. So you're not confined to the region where you essentially started your subscription, but really are able to do cross region and cross subscription recoveries.
Amazing. Brilliant. Oh, hopefully that answers that question. Thank you, Pierre. And then another question that we've had here, it says, what types of organizations or cloud environments benefit most from Cloud Rewind? Again, good question.
So not every company in the world is fundamentally interested in going 100% to cloud. So we've got a huge amount of companies that still have a lot of on-prem workloads and assets. Then we've got a lot of companies that is hybrid. So they've got, and that's the most, where they've got a nice array of applications and dependencies on-prem, and then also in the cloud. And they do various methods of synchronizing the data. But then you've got cloud environments or companies that are cloud first, where they've got all the eggs in one basket. Now, Cloud Rewind, as it stands, is created for the cloud providers. So in other words, traditionally, if you have any data outside of the cloud, that'll be difficult for us to rebuild, purely for the fact that we integrate with the backbone of those three providers. So essentially, this is for any company, no matter how big you are, as long as you've got presence in a cloud environment, we can protect that cloud environment for you.
Amazing. Brilliant stuff. That's been all the questions that have been asked. So thank you very much. There's not been any others that have been posted in here. So yeah, just for me to kind of say thanks very much for all of you for joining us today on our last webinar, Commvault Webinar Wednesday of the year, or learning all about Cloud Rewind. So thanks for joining us. If you're watching this on demand, thanks for watching this back as well. Any questions, you can email the Commvault team. And finally, of course, thanks ever so much to Pierre for a really, really good presentation. Hopefully see you in the new year on another Commvault Webinar Wednesday. All the best for the holidays, and see you again soon. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.